So I welcome Slovenian scientist and entrepreneur Enej Kuščer. He is well renowned and made successful companies ACIES BIO and Nu. So I'm really happy to have him here. He was also here last time in our conference, and it's our pleasure to meet him again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. And yes, I hope it's okay for everyone. I was instructed to continue in English. So indeed, it's a pleasure to be back. Last year, I was scolded a little bit that I was a little bit too scientific and that I didn't explain enough about what we actually do. Because I intentionally did not want to sound commercial. But based on the urging of Martina, I did include today a little bit more deep dive into how our platform actually works, how the processes work, what the digital twin means, and what we're trying to do with that. I do still have a few introductory slides just to kind of bring you into the vibe, but I think that Branka and Gordana did an amazing job introducing us to the longevity concepts. So I think that the main message that we are all aware is that demand is here, right? Both in terms of the, let's say, silver tsunami of the aging population on one side, the increasing rise of chronic disease, unfortunately. But at the same time, yes, there is an increase of public awareness that there is something called health span versus lifespan, that the governments are starting to talk like, okay, until now, the policies have been focused on sick care and monetizing on developing drugs for illness and keeping people alive longer with drugs in sickness, but rather trying to focus on keeping people healthier for longer. So there is now actually a significant movement in various world governments to start endorsing health span policies into their, let's say, legislation. On the other side, there is also a convergence of technologies. So we have, there was a question about the AI, the deep tech, commoditization of testing, right? So a genome test used to cost tens of thousands of dollars. Well, actually, the first one cost $1 billion, right? And now it's a couple of $100 in a few days, right? So it's the commoditization of testing is just insane and really available at hand. But at the same time, connecting now that with the power of real-time feedback from wearable devices. Not only everybody now has Auras and Apple Watches, and many people have continuous glucose monitors, but we're starting to bring really a lot of insights into let's say the smart wearables, and it's inevitable that as a society we go forward with this transition to go from, let's say, the current state of affairs where we are reactive, we wait for people to get sick, to proactive. We proactively catch before it becomes a pathology. We go from generic, where everybody's prescribed the same thing, towards really personalized and precision health. We go from silos to integrated, and especially we go from a normal to an optimal, right? Because today, I think it's still kind of, accepted that when you're 60, 70, 80, you say, my back and this, and I can't climb the stairs anymore. Well, but that's normal, right? I'm 65, I'm set. No, you should be looking at, can you be optimal? Can you do something to be better, right? Because there's a lot of what we can achieve. And we do believe that, the optimized wellness, precision health, disease prevention, and even reversal of a lot of the effects of aging are within our grasp. So as company, we actually try to see even kind of a step forward, and we believe that, not long into the future, we will really start fostering kind of longevity ecosystems and even longevity nations. The companies will start creating metrics of seeing how much they've improved people's health span over the course of the time. And that will be, kind of all interconnected, from insurance and system policies to medical care to food and nutrition that has been a topic of today's discussion. We're starting to see incredible amount of deep tech and data-driven approaches to precision sports. So we know that, enhancing with illegal drugs is not the right way to go. But being able to have a lot of data to see how each athlete recovers based on his unique gut microbiome, his unique genetic fingerprint and so on, to drive that and to drive the training routines is going to get that last edge of a couple of percentage points, etc. Yeah? So there's a lot of what's going to be happening in the next decade or two. So I'm not going to go into hallmarks of aging. I think we had a fantastic introduction into that by Branka. I think it's the only thing that I would mention here on this slide is to be aware that there is the intrinsic drivers of the let's say of the change in the hallmarks of aging, which is internal, and the extrinsic drivers, which are kind of our environmental, lifestyle, diet, stress, and so on. And it's a lifelong journey, right? So people often, they say, oh, I'm either too old to start, caring, or I'm too young, it doesn't affect me yet, right? No, it's a lifelong journey, knowing about your hormones, knowing about your blood vessels, your visceral fat, your bone mineral density, and so on. So I think there's no time in life where, especially today with this ability to have this kind of data-driven information, we sometimes kind of, joke that we have a manual for almost everything in our life, except for our own bodies, right? And so now with this kind of growing science, if we finally are able to understand the user manual of our own bodies, what drives our hormones, what drives our anxiety and depression and mood swings when we are in puberty times, or when we are trying to conceive, or when we are whatever and so on. So it's not just thinking about longevity, right? It's about really being information driven and knowing what's important, how you can actually do stuff that matter to your body. But I do agree again with the statements from both Branka and Gordana, who said everybody needs to know their own body, their own biology, because we're so unique. And it's again, the image on the right hand side, it's a lifelong journey. And so when we talk about precision health, right, there's this whole range of groups of discussions, and kind of Branka said, okay, I don't want to go into the topic of are we going to live to 150 or whatever, right? So that's the topic of lifespan extension, and there are people who are very, very passionate about that. But a lot of the longevity world today is really about this kind of squaring the curve. It's about the health span. So it's about preventing premature decline in our ability, right? But I am very passionate of going further upstream, of helping people to kind of have great health throughout their lifetimes, right? Because there's a lot of people, young and mid-age and so on, living in depression, living in obesity, living in all sorts of chronic diseases. And they say, well, that's just the way I am. I have mood swings. One day I'm like this, one day I'm like that. No, maybe I have an MTHFR, homozygous minor deficiency, and you're just lacking the right type of pathways for your dopamine and serotonin to be able to recycle properly in your brain, right? So no, it is a little bit about you, but you also like the right nutrition specifically for you to support those enzymatic pathways, right? And if you provide that, you stabilize your system to no longer have those mood swings. So again, I think it's a whole journey. These days, especially now also GPT is fun, we all play with that and so on, but giving your trust in what you should do to an AI chatbot is really dangerous, because again, it's going to give a generic response of the crawling through all the Reddit and Facebook posts and whatever, Google opinions and so on and so forth, where there's a lot of misinformation, right? So even though a lot of the consumers now want to go towards preventive health and longevity, but there's a lot of disinformation. It's a fragmented industry. And if you, like we've been discussing earlier, you do a genome here, a microbiome there, blood there, whatever, the data is not integrated and doesn't talk to each other, right? So it's really important if you see from, let's say, a result in your blood that something is elevated or something is low, you don't just go immediately hitting that with a hammer with the first drug that you can think of. You have to understand why, what types of gut microbes may be interfering now, how, which genes are potentially the culprit and so on, combined with the diets that you're having. So the approach that we're taking with New is really to try to make sense of all of these, right? So kind of to deconvolute this complexity of human biology and to kind of leverage the evidence-based science to guide this precision health and longevity. And it's a mouthful. So how are we trying to do that? So first, we try to really kind of analyze individual biomarkers across the spectrum. So we try to look at every single gene that is known connected to any types of health outcomes, whether this is, longitudinal GWAS studies or whether these are single gene experiments on knockouts, models and so on. And we try to understand what those genes do within their space and with the metabolic pathways and within the entire system. And then we do the same for the gut microbes. We try to understand every single bacteria, every single virus, every single fungi and so on that lives within you. And then we try to understand for every blood biomarker, how is that correlated with the genetics, with the microbes, with your diets, with your lifestyle, and then try to put that together. And again, the question that was already mentioned today, there's a lot of course, classical kind of research, scientific literature, PubMed, clinical data and so on, but there's also a lot of deep learning, machine learning, and AI support because there's a lot of data to try to make sense. So really building this kind of graphical neural network, integrating, decoding, and connecting the dots in order to drive interpretation of the health. And there is a journey to be done. So we are currently very, very biologically driven. That is, we are very much on the left side of this graph. So we're looking into genome, the epigenome, the microbiome, the blood. We're starting to integrate the first wearable devices and so on. So we go from a biome towards a digitome. So we're connecting the smart devices that know about our stuff. Then we're starting to go towards the exposome, so learning about our environment. So I have continuously, wherever I go, these days I'm wearing a small device that measures the CO2 levels, the oxygen in the room, the temperatures, the humidities, and so on. So we're continuously aware how that is affecting our cognitive function, our ability to kind of perform and so on. And we have smart houses, etc. And we're going to a physiome, right? So whole body scanners, DEXA scanners, Menla, and so on and so forth, right? So starting to create really a complete picture of who we are, what is our environment and ecosystem, and what makes us kind of, our function within the space. So in a way, the way kind of this digital twin or the avatar above represents, I don't know if it's visible here on the slides, but you go from kind of the least resolution to the highest resolution kind of space, right? So kind of the more data you provide the system, the more precise your knowledge becomes, right? Because if you only, again, look at genes and blood, maybe you have some understanding, but then if you know what's going on within the environment and the ecosystem of the person, you have a aha moment of, this is what's actually affecting it. So, what we try to do really as the new core is to try to build the most comprehensive and personalized AI longevity engine. So how do we do that? We take all of that data that I was just talking about on the left side, trying to kind of go from, multi-omic testing to wearable devices. We're now adding kind of, as I said, physiome, so clinical input data, MRI, CT scans, and so on in the future, to various types of medical background health questionnaires, lifestyle questionnaires, and so on. All of that is fed into the engine. And the engine then makes all these kind of connections of the dots, interpretation, and so on, linking that to health outcomes, which then comes out in terms of what you want to see. So in terms of, do I want to know about my food or the lifestyle or diets? Am I worried about my cardiovascular system or liver or reproductive and so on? Or am I a biohacker and I want to know about my, biological age clocks, the gut microbiome age, the epigenetic age, and so on, right? So as you will see kind of in the platform, every single, kind of statement or analysis that comes out of the platform is actually backed by science. So kind of the engine always is able to kind of link up the most relevant data, which was used in kind of the crunching of this information, right? So you always get, okay, you're saying this, but what's the clinical evidence behind that? And that drives various types of solutions, whether this is a new pro for practitioners and so on, or whether this is an app for an end consumer. So as I mentioned, what we did as a kind of a first instance, we built, because we believe that, there's kind of two journeys to be had. One is a platform to enable the ecosystem. So for practitioners, whether this is, health practitioners or nutritionists and so on, basically to help them streamline their workflow with, really decision support tools with data, integrative insights and so on, to help drive that personalized health optimization for their clients. And on the other side, we have I think, quite fun and engaging app, which is also available to end consumers, where you can also kind of understand your data, see your trends, learn about what's recommended for you and so on, which I'll show you a little bit later. So how does the new platform actually work? Now we get to that part. So basically it's as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4. So you start your journey, you go online, you check our website, order your test kits, or if you have your own digital data. So if you've done testing before with 23andMe or other, it's important. So a lot of people are not aware of that, but it's important where you've done your tests, because very often you will actually not get raw data. You will just get some kind of interpretation in a maybe 20-page PDF report, which is just eat your broccoli and don't eat that. But you will not get raw data. Actually, if you go read the small print, the company that did the testing owns your raw data, which is really, really not right. So anyway, but if you have your raw data from any other third-party source, you can just upload it into the platform. The way New has been designed is that it's while it is also your personal kind of recommendation, health companion, it is also your biological data bank in a way. So we really are there as a custodian. The data is incredibly secure and encrypted, but it's always your data. It's never ours. It's our job to provide you utility and useful information, but people own their data, and it's really the only way that it should be. So anyway, you start your journey, you go online, you get your test kits, or you upload your data, create your account, and so on. If you don't have your data, you get the test kits, you sample stool, saliva, and then the blood test. Actually, again, here's important points. We've done a lot of testing. All these finger prick, tiny things sent in a post and so on, that doesn't work. I mean, it's okay if you want to do some very simple measurements of, some hormones or minerals. For some of these things, it's okay-ish, but not if you really want to do a deep dive into longevity. So here in Slovenia, for example, we've partnered with Adria Lab. You just go there, you give your, extender arm, you get your blood done. They send the raw data directly to our service. So anyway, you get your stool, your saliva, your blood, and your journey begins. You get your test results through your digital twin, you get your age clocks, you get health insights. But it's really when it becomes truly exciting is when you start seeing your trends. Okay, now I'll try to do this. I'll change this diet. I'll drop off whatever types of food that are interfering with my gut biome or causing this blood inflammation, or take a few supplements that are recommended, right? And then you see how that affects. So you really start monitoring your journey, because again, it's been mentioned several times a day. It's really important when you're doing these tests. Yes, it's a time point, but it's only a time point, right? So it's really important for us to start building an awareness of how our body behaves and responds to diets, to supplements, to lifestyle changes, and so on. So the platform tries to be as precise based on the scientific evidence that we have today, but it will continue to kind of learn based on real life data. So if you do some changes, if you're seeing that something works and so on, it will be there with you on the journey, right? And it's really modular. So like I said earlier, so again, regardless of number of data inputs, right? You can do just blood, fine. You get some reasonable information out of that, but maybe it's great if you add a microbiome, even better if you add a genome, and so on. But it doesn't shy away from providing as much information as possible just with blood, right? So it tries to kind of start, help take people on this journey even at the earlier stage of their, let's say, self-awareness. That's point number one. Point number two, like I said earlier, we can also take pretty much any third-party data, right? As long as it's raw data. And many do allow you to kind of go somewhere in the profile settings, whatever, and 7 to 10 steps, and then eventually you will find download raw data. They don't make it easy, but they often make it available. And like I said, also, the more data input, the higher resolution, the more precise. But really, the bottom message is the key: regular and consistent retesting. People ask, how often? Again, it depends. If you know a lot about yourself, once a year is plenty enough, right? But when you're at the start of the journey and there are things, all over the place, and something is, completely up and something is completely missing and so on, you want to start tweaking. You may want to do like once a quarter on some of those key things, right? So you want to get your system under the control. And then once you have it under the control, you start listening to your body. And again, we come back a little bit to that earlier mention, right? So there was a conversation during the break, in today's, let's say, digitized society, most people no longer listen to their bodies, right? They don't, you can say, okay, I can listen to my body, I would like the cookie, right? No, that's not listening to your body, right? That's listening to your dopamine. But the platform like this does allow you to start seeing real evidence, right? And okay, I've done this, here is how it responds, I've done that. And so slowly you're really becoming sensitized and starting to really know, like, if I'm doing this, this is how my body responds. And once you're at that stage, again, for me, it's once a year is plenty. But, it's just that, being able to not just say, okay, I've done this, now it's, for the next 10 years, I don't need to bother. That's the wrong approach. Anyway, again, we've gone through these already: stool, blood, saliva. You get your data and different types of outputs and reports and so on. Just kind of taking you a little bit into kind of the way it's structured. There is going to be a lot of kind of as you're zooming in and out of your body, you want to go kind of again, depends. You may want to keep it simple. You want to say, okay, I just want to have, whatever foods are recommended for me and which activities. Yes, you can keep it at that level. But if you want to deep dive, right, and you're zooming into your liver health and you're starting to see what kind of data is coming out, you will see information kind of how, based on the analysis, is comprising certain risks and so on. So here, for example, just in this, illustration, it would be like, here, you have your microbiome, it's gray, which means there is kind of a balance in your gut microbiome. It contributes about 30% effect to this area of interest where I'm right now. Let's say I'm in the liver. But it sort of balances itself out. You probably have a few bad microbes, a few good microbes. If I click on this bubble, it will take me to all the hundreds of bacteria in there. So you will see kind of all the stuff that is popping up, and there will be lots of green ones and lots of red ones and so on. But it's kind of neutral overall, right? However, it will say, well, for this particular area, your genetics actually has the biggest impact, and it's green. It's mostly positive. Again, if I click on the bubble of the genome, it will take me to all the genes associated with this area. And, blood right now is an area for me to focus on, right? So it's something for me to work on. So I click on that one and I will get all the learnings, like what should I do, what's the critical marker, and so on. So again, like explaining kind of strengths, neutral focus, and it's looking at all the kind of, clinical evidence behind that. And it's also kind of, personalizing that against, not just the general kind of clinical literature and the PubMed and so on, but it's looking at, the sex, the age, the ethnicity, and all the other data that is available, right? And again, here I do need to kind of, for full transparency, I need to throw a caveat. It's way more precise when we are looking into the white Caucasian, even more precisely male, but female is also okay. Much less data when you get to, Indian, Asian, African, and so on. So we're really trying to kind of work hard to partner with, groups over there to start to be able to get more access to raw data from those regions, to be able to kind of train the engines to be as precise. But simplified, if you look at the, we have access to the UK Biobank, for example. There is a lot of people who are of Pakistani and Indian origin. Then you go to a US Biobank, then you have quite a few people who are of Latino or Asian, Chinese origin, and so on. So you have some, but it's not as, it's just kind of, there is still a bias in the clinical literature and clinical evidence towards the white, Caucasian, predominantly male. Anyway, we go into kind of different aspects of blood biomarkers, whether this is for prediction, diagnostics, aided by a practitioner. So this is really also good. Once you have this kind of data, work with, with a practitioner, work with a practice that is, using this type of platform to be able to guide you on your journey, monitoring, personalized reference, optimal ranges, and so on. And of course, most important is building your trend lines. I'm not going to go into, kind of the details, because I think we've covered that a little, enough in the past, but just kind of explaining kind of how we, let's say in a simple term, much of what we look in terms of the knowledge of the population data is looking at, single nucleotide polymorphisms, which is where we are kind of accounting for much of the genetic variation between individuals. And this is really important to kind of know. This is not talking about pathogenic or let's say disease markers or acquired mutations that happen, right? So this is more talking about the variability that was mentioned by Branka earlier. One type of variation help a certain type of ancestors to survive a long ice age period, but now it's causing obesity, right? So I have those genes. I have the obesity genes. Luckily, luckily I'm aware of that, and I'm being very mindful of that, so I take care of my diet, right? The same goes for the Alzheimer genes, for example. You know, you mentioned that in certain populations, the ApoE4 doesn't have any effect. Well, why not? There's been plenty of studies looking, for example, at indigenous populations, either Nubas in Africa or Inuits in Alaska. They have the same prevalence of these genes, so the same statistical, let's say, occurrence of these genes as the rest of us, but they have almost, you know, they have the regular, random, occasional situation of an Alzheimer. But then you look at the kids who got tired of the cold or the hot or whatever, they moved to New York, they build their families usually around relatively tight genetic, let's say, confinement. All of a sudden, if you have this gene, your risk for Alzheimer just explodes. The same level as the rest of us, because they start eating burgers and pizzas and pastas and so on, right? So again, it's not that these are, you know, the bad genes or the good genes or whatever genes. And it's, you know, I really like the comment of what Branka says is, be aware of them so that you can't change them, but you can change your environment to get the maximum out of your genetic ancestry, right? So this is really the important message. Plenty has been said about the epigenetics is kind of, you know, following you throughout your kind of life journey. You know, the methylations are written off, written on, erased off, and they have a whole bunch of interesting features. But sometimes these features are also exaggerated in today's world. So it's also kind of something for us to be mindful of. And the gut microbiome, again, you know, it's important to be aware. You know, there's a huge impact of our gut microbiome, and we do see the science confirming that. We see the evidence, but it's not the be-all end-all. It's a part of our journey. They are, you know, if we think we have about 10 trillion human cells, we have about 100 trillion bacterial cells, right? We have about 20,000 human genes in every single cell. Well, we have millions of additional bacterial and viral genes. So they mean a lot. They mean a lot to our immune system, to our digestion, even our cognitive function, right? There's a lot of our urges in terms of our dietary behavior because we've nurtured a type of bacteria that craves certain types of food, which is why your New Year's resolutions are so difficult to keep on, right? But again, they're not the be-all, end-all. It's important for us to be aware of what is in there and how to nurture the let's say, the supportive ones and how to maybe slowly starve out the negative guys. And it's a very, very nascent and growing science. It's a very exciting science, but it's a part of the story. So the last bit that is also part of your onboarding journey. So while you do the saliva, the stool, the blood, the epigenome, and so on, there's also the questionnaires part of it. So this is also very important because certain things about, you know, your life we can't know about. So whether you're, you know, on any kind of medications like, you know, I don't know, SSRI inhibitors for you know, depression or whatever, this is really important, right? Because first of all, we probably will know that from your gut microbiome, your genes anyway. But if you're taking certain drugs, they may be very, 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 contraindicative or cross-reactive with certain types of food supplements. So, you know, it would be really, really dangerous for you to take certain types of, let's say, supplements which are otherwise deemed healthy if you are, for example, you know, on certain types of medications, or, for example, if you are a smoker. You know, if you're a smoker, you're eating vitamin B12, you know, B vitamins are fantastic, right? And especially B12 is a longevity B vitamin. Everybody loves it, right? But if you're a smoker, it actually increases the likelihood of all types of cancer because it's like adding fuel to the fire. So it's really important for the platform and the engine to know about the kind of the, let's say, your let's say, background or lifestyle and environment in order to really make smart recommendations that are true. And then the last, I think it's one of the last key slides, is when, just for giving a little bit of understanding of how the age risk and age clocks are perceived, right? So when looking at certain biomarkers, there is really, each biomarker has a different curve. Sometimes you want to have as little biomarker as possible, right? And that's good, right? The one on the right side. Sometimes there's like an L curve or a U curve, right? So when there's certain range is healthy, too little is not good, too much is not good. But there are certain biomarkers where it's really a V, right? You really want to be, spot in the middle of that, bottom of the V. Anything left and right can be really quite dangerous. And again, this is something where AI is teaching us a lot when it's kind of, looking at the totality of data of human health. Feeding various types of recommendations, and again, this has been said today, this is so rule of thumb, but the important message is always the same. Genetics only plays a small part of your destiny. It's a lot about what you do with that genetics. And we know that from identical twins, we know that from all sorts of things. But again, if we take back that, these two examples that we just used, the obesity or the Alzheimer, genetics does play a big role if you're ignorant of it, right? But if you manage your environment, your diet and your lifestyle, well, then you almost eliminate the risk of these particular genetics. So it doesn't have a role anymore, right? That's really the key. So, the final message that I always use in my presentations is, and especially this is so true today with the longevity revolution around the corner is, it's like the cars. First few years, they will do well. Then it's a bit of tweaking, a bit of maintenance, a bit of a car mechanic. But, if we neglect it, within a few years, they're going to be garbage. If you treat it well, you have a 100-year-old old-timer that's sometimes better than a new factory model, right? So it's about maintenance, about the knowledge. And just kind of to introduce a little bit of our amazing team, we have phenomenal talent, in the group. Each one, I would say, one of the world-leading experts in their field. Marco, our CTO, is over there in the audience. He's taking care that the systems work. He's the man behind the entire IT infrastructure, but we have Philip, our CSO, we have Clement, who makes sure that architecture is running. Leon, one of the best microbiologists, I would say, that the last few generations have produced. The other Leon is a biochemist and nutritional scientist, so really, really a top talented multidisciplinary team behind this. And then, of course, a lot of others that I just cannot put on one single slide. So with that, I would say thank you so much. We did add, again, based on our discussions, a very small kind of, promotional thing at the end. If anyone wants to try out the platform, to try out how this works, we've created a special code for the društvo how's it called? Za vitalno podaljševanje življenja, so DVPZ. That gives a discount to all the people in the audience. It's going to be live for, I think, a couple of weeks. So join us if you want to experience the journey. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Enej. Še to vprašanje mogoče eno. Okay. We have one quick question for Enej because we are late on time. Does anyone have quick question? Otherwise, we have for the round table. Yes, Melissa?
Is this available in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's available anywhere. It's a global. So the only part that in the U.S. you need to take care of yourself because we don't have local partnerships is the blood lab. But Quest Diagnostics, LabCorp, anywhere around the corner, you just get the same protocol as we do, and then it's just a digital upload. But yes.
Thank you, Enej. And I'm thinking, what is your experience with doctors when doctors are seeing the results from your platform? How do they react to the patient who introduced the doctor with your options? Thank you.
That's a good question. So the question is whether the doctor is using the platform and guiding their patient. But this is why we've developed kind of the two paths, right? So there is a lot of clinics that are now starting to really work very proactively towards this, let's say, systemic approach to precision health, right? And so they sign up to the platform, and then they are the ones that onboard their clients or their patients to be able to see their kind of, holistic science. On the other hand side, if you have a patient that comes to a regular doctor's office with this, I don't think that most doctors are trained for that at this stage, right? So again, I think it's going to be a journey over the kind of coming periods. Whether you're a classical trained doctor who is a sick care kind of oriented, but there has been an increasing demand actually coming from practitioners who saw these. Sometimes they actually tried these as users who said, hey, I actually want to use such a platform for my patients or my clients, right? Which is what drove us actually over the last year and a half to develop the platform dedicated to practitioners. So they actually get to see a lot more clinical side of the story and the stats and the data and so on, because they're the ones also able to kind of help guide their clients on, let's say, the health optimization journey. But there's a growing population of practitioners like you as well.